"You can stay here," my father said flatly, "but don't expect me to treat you like a kid anymore." That was the first thing he told me when I walked into his house. Not "welcome home," not "I'm sorry for your loss." Just that a line that sounded more like a warning than a greeting. "My name's Ethan Miller, I'm 17. And this is the story of how moving in with my father, the man who'd ignored me for 14 years, turned into one of the coldest experiences of my life. My mom died of cancer early this year. She'd been sick for months, and toward the end, I could tell she was holding on more for me than for herself. When she passed, I didn't cry right away. I didn't even have the energy. Grief has a strange way of hollowing you out until you feel nothing but silence. After the funeral, I was told I had no choice but to live with my father, Richard Miller, a man I barely knew. The court called him my legal guardian. I called him a stranger with my last name. The day I arrived at his house, the sky was dull gray, and the wind had that biting chill that always sneaks into your bones in late winter. The bus dropped me off a block away, and I dragged my 2 suitcases up the long, curved driveway. The house was big, white siding, black shutters, 2 floors, a manicured lawn that screamed suburban perfection. But it felt sterile. You know that feeling when a place is too clean, too quiet, too perfect, like it's been staged for a real estate ad, not lived in by real people. That was his house. When the door opened, a woman with honey blonde hair greeted me. She looked like she stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Polite smile, soft voice, perfect posture. "Hi, you must be Ethan. I'm Melissa," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Behind her stood 2 boys, Jake and Owen, 12-year-old twins, both wide-eyed and curious, in that half-innocent, half-mischievous way kids have. They stared at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into their living room, which, to be fair, I was. Then my father appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked older than I remembered, but not in a weak way. He was the kind of man who'd aged into hardness, sharp jaw, iron gray hair, an expression that made you feel like you were already disappointing him before you said a word. "Your room's upstairs. Last door on the left," he said. And then, as if it was a rule he'd been rehearsing for years, "Don't touch anything that's not yours. No hug, no small talk." Just a list of boundaries from a man who never gave me space to begin with. That first night, I sat at the dinner table surrounded by strangers. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, but the silence was heavier than any meal I'd ever eaten. The twins bickered quietly. Melissa asked polite questions about my school, and my father just chewed, watching, measuring. I could feel every second tick by. At one point, I tried to thank Melissa for dinner, but my voice came out small, almost hesitant. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. My father didn't even look up. When dinner was done, I offered to wash my plate. Melissa said, "Oh, that's sweet, honey, but the dishwasher's right there." My father interrupted. "If he's used to doing dishes, let him. Builds character." It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Like he was reminding everyone that I wasn't part of their family dynamic, just a guest. A temporary presence. My room was small but clean. A single bed, a desk, a dresser, and a window overlooking the backyard. I unpacked in silence, arranging my few belongings, some clothes, a photo of Mum, and my old laptop. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every sound felt foreign. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the hallway clock, the way the wooden floors creaked when someone walked past my door. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a waiting room. The next few weeks were quiet, painfully quiet. I went to school, came back, stayed in my room. I avoided my father's gaze whenever possible. He wasn't outright cruel, just distant, like he'd built a wall between us long ago and didn't plan on tearing it down. I found a part-time job at a local community center teaching kids basic computer skills. It wasn't much, but it gave me something to do, something that was mine. I saved every dollar I earned, and after 3 months, I finally bought the thing I'd been dreaming of since before. Mum got sick, a custom-built gaming PC. That it wasn't just a computer. It was a symbol of freedom, of control, of something I made for myself. I spent nights researching parts, comparing specs, and watching tutorials. When the boxes finally arrived, I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, assembling it piece by piece. The click of each component sliding into place felt like reclaiming a little part of my life. When I powered it on, the soft blue glow of the screen washed over me. For the first time since moving here, I smiled. This was my space, my world, the one corner of this house where I could exist on my own terms. Of course, peace doesn't last long in a house ruled by control. One afternoon, I came home early from work and froze in the doorway. Jake was sitting in my chair, a controller in hand, while Owen leaned over the desk, sipping a can of soda. Before I could even speak, Jake flinched. The soda tipped and half of it spilled straight across my keyboard. The sound of fizzing liquid hit me like a gunshot. I stepped forward, my voice lower than I expected. "What are you doing?" Jake jumped up, eyes wide. "I'm sorry. We just wanted to try." Owen grabbed tissues, panicking. We'll clean it. I took a slow breath, counting to 5, then said quietly, "From now on, no one touches my computer unless I'm here." "Got it." They both nodded, faces pale. That evening at dinner, I thought the incident was behind us, until Melissa spoke up, her voice all sweet concern. "Ethan, I heard about the little spill. The boys didn't mean any harm, you know. You don't need to be so strict." I looked up from my plate. "It's fine. I just don't want anyone using it when I'm gone." She gave a small, forced laugh. "You could be a little more flexible. They're just curious kids." Before I could answer, my father set his fork down. "If you can afford something like that, you can afford to share it." His tone wasn't angry, just dismissive. Like my effort meant nothing, I said quietly. "I worked for that money. Every cent." He didn't respond. He just went back to eating, as if the conversation was over. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Melissa gave me a sympathetic glance that didn't feel real, and the twins avoided my eyes. I didn't say another word, because I already knew, in this house, my voice didn't matter. That night, I sat in front of my computer, scrolling aimlessly. The faint hum of the CPU fan filled the room, steady and familiar. I thought about my father's words, about the way he said my house, my rules, without even realizing how small that made me feel. To him, everything under this roof was his. The walls, the air, even the things I'd earned for myself. And I realized something. You can live in a house and still be homeless. In the weeks that followed, I kept to myself. I stayed out of their way, did my chores, went to work, and spent the rest of my time behind that glowing blue screen. It became more than just a machine. It was my escape, a place where I could be anyone, talk to people who didn't see me as a burden, and forget that the man downstairs was technically my father. But in the back of my mind, I knew it couldn't last forever. In a house where control meant everything to him, my independence was a threat, and eventually, he'd find a way to remind me exactly where I stood. There's a strange kind of quiet that settles over you after too many small not anger, not sadness, just stillness. That's what I felt in the weeks after the keyboard incident. I stopped trying to make eye contact at dinner. I stayed out later after work, sometimes grabbing cheap takeout and eating it in my car just to avoid sitting across from him. The less I said, the easier it was to breathe. But silence, in a house like his, doesn't go unnoticed. It gets mistaken for obedience. One evening in late April, I came home and heard my name through the half-open kitchen door. My father's voice, low, confident, the same tone he used when he was negotiating at his dealership. "I'll just give the twins Ethan's setup. It's ridiculous for a kid to have a $2,000 computer in his room anyway." Melissa laughed softly. "You think he'll just hand it over?" "He will if he wants to keep living under my roof." I froze. For a second, my pulse was so loud I could barely hear the rest. "Besides," he continued, "it's not like he bought it for work. He plays games. Those boys could actually learn something from it." I didn't wait to hear more. I went straight upstairs, shut my door, and stared at the glowing monitor. My hands were cold, but my chest burned. That setup, every dollar of it, was the one thing in this house that felt mine. And he wanted to give it away like it was a spare piece of furniture. A few days later, he came to me directly. I heard the knock first, 2 heavy taps before the door creaked open. He didn't ask to come in. He just stepped inside, looking around like he was inspecting property he already owned. "Ethan," he said, folding his arms, "I've been thinking. The twins' birthday is coming up, and I want you to do something nice for them." I didn't look away from my screen. "What kind of something?" He smiled, that condescending curve of his mouth that always made my stomach twist. "You should give them your computer. As a gift. It'd mean a lot to them." I turned then, slowly. "You want me to give them my computer?" "Yes, you can build another one later. You're good with that stuff. They're just kids." I let out a small, humorless laugh. "No." The air in the room shifted instantly. His smile vanished, replaced by that cold, familiar glare, the one that said I'd just stepped out of line. "Excuse me." I stood up, meeting his eyes for once. "No, Dad. It's mine." He took a step closer, his voice dropping lower. "Nothing in this house is yours. You live here because I allow it. You eat my food, sleep in my house, and use my electricity. You think that machine belongs to you. I felt the heat rise in my throat, but I kept my tone calm. I paid for every part of it. You didn't spend a dime, he scoffed. You're under my roof, Ethan. That means my rules. If you don't want to share, maybe you don't deserve to have it at all. He paused, letting the words sink in, then added almost with satisfaction, if you don't give it to them, I'll throw it out myself. Then he left, just like that, like the conversation was over and my compliance was guaranteed. I sat down slowly, staring at the reflection of my face on the dark screen. No anger, no panic, just clarity. He wanted control, so I decided to give him none. That night, I unplugged every cable, cleaned every part, and took a few photos. I posted an ad online, custom gaming PC, excellent condition, serious buyers only. I set the price slightly higher than market value, $2,600, partly because I needed the money, and partly because I wanted to prove something to myself. I could let it go on my own terms. Within 2 hours, someone messaged me. By morning, we'd arranged to meet. When the buyer handed me the cash, crisp bills folded into an envelope, I felt a strange mix of relief and grief. It wasn't about the machine anymore. It was about control. For once, I'd made a decision before my father could take it from me. That evening, dinner was awkwardly quiet again. I almost felt bad for the calm before the storm. Almost around 9, the storm came. The door to my room swung open so hard it hit the wall. My father stood there, eyes wide, his face red. Where's your computer? I didn't move. Gone. Gone where? Sold it. He blinked, as if he hadn't heard me right. You what? I looked him in the eye, voice even. You said you'd throw it away, so I sold it before that could happen. The silence that followed was heavy. Even the air felt thick. Behind him, Melissa appeared in the doorway, her expression caught between confusion and disbelief. The twins peeked around her legs, their eyes darting between us. You sold it, she repeated quietly. I nodded. Every part. Someone picked it up this morning. My father's jaw tightened, his fists clenched at his sides. You think you can just, he stuttered, but his voice cracked with rage. You think you can undermine me in my own house? I stood up. I didn't undermine you. I followed your rule, your house, your choice. Remember, I just made mine before you made yours. For a second I thought he might actually hit me. His face flushed, and his breath came short. But then, just as quickly, he turned away. Melissa stepped closer, whispering, Richard, stop. He ignored her. You're ungrateful. He spat. You live here for free, and this is how you repay me. I felt my voice steady in a way it hadn't before. I never asked to live here. You made that decision for me. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as a son, but as something unrecognizable. You're just like your mother, he said finally, voice dripping with contempt. Something in me snapped then, but not in anger, in clarity. You're right, I said quietly. She built things with love. You only know how to destroy them. For once, he didn't have a response. He just stood there, red-faced, breathing hard before storming out, muttering something about disrespect. Melissa lingered, her eyes darting between the empty desk and the envelope of cash on my nightstand. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she whispered, You shouldn't have done that. Maybe, I said, but it was mine to do. When they left, the room felt lighter. The hum that used to come from the PC was gone, replaced by silence, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the bare desk, and realized something simple but liberating. You can't lose what you've already let go of. I didn't win that night. Not in the way people think of winning. There was no grand victory, no cheering audience. Just a quiet decision that said, I don't belong to you anymore. And for me, that was enough. After that night, something inside the house changed quietly, almost invisibly. There were no more shouting matches, no slammed doors, no late-night lectures, only silence. But it wasn't peaceful silence. It was the kind that fills every hallway and makes the air feel heavier than it should. I stopped speaking to my father, not out of spite, just out of exhaustion. Every word I'd ever said to him turned into ammunition sooner or later, and I was tired of arming the enemy. So I went to school, went to work, came home, and stayed in my room. We existed under the same roof like two ghosts haunting separate rooms. At dinner, Melissa tried to keep things normal. She'd ask about my classes, the twins' grades, small things to fill the air. But my father rarely answered. He'd read the paper, chew slowly, and pretend I wasn't there. It should have hurt. Maybe it did. But mostly, it felt like confirmation of something I'd known for years. He didn't hate me, not exactly. He just didn't know how to see me as a person, and I no longer cared to make him try. Weeks passed. Summer rolled in. I spent most afternoons at the community center, teaching kids how to build simple websites or troubleshoot old computers. The place was noisy and bright and smelled like pizza and printer ink. Everything that house WASN single quotes T. Sometimes. When one of the kids would ask, "Do your parents come watch you teach?" I'd just smile and say, "They're busy." That was easier than explaining the truth. My father had never once shown up for anything that wasn't about himself. One evening, as I was packing up, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Reddit. Someone had commented on the post I'd made months earlier, the one where I'd written about my father trying to take my PC. I'd posted it out of frustration one sleepless night. No names, no locations, just a story about control, about a parent who saw respect as ownership. I hadn't expected much, just needed to put it somewhere, but the post had taken on a life of its own. Thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments, people saying things like "you did the right thing," or "that kind of parent doesn't deserve your respect." Reading those comments had felt like breathing again after being underwater too long. Someone out there understood. I hadn't realized anyone in my house had read it until that Sunday afternoon. Melissa knocked on my door. Not the usual polite knock, but a hesitant one. "Eth, can we talk for a second?" Her voice sounded softer than usual, almost nervous. I opened the door, expecting another conversation about chores or dinner plans, but she was holding her phone. I could see the Reddit logo glowing on the screen. She stepped inside quietly. "I read something today," she said. "It took me a minute to realize it was you." I froze. She looked down, thumb tracing the edge of her phone. "When your dad told me you were moving in, that was the first time I even knew he had a son." Her words landed heavier than I expected. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said. "I judged you before I even knew you. He made it sound like you were some rebellious kid your mother couldn't handle. I didn't know the truth." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she added quietly, "I should have seen how he talked to you. I should have said something." It was the first real apology I'd ever heard in that house. And somehow it didn't make me angry, it just made me tired. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. After that day, Melissa changed. Subtle things at first. She stopped defending him during dinner, stopped forcing small talk when he ignored me. Sometimes, I'd catch her giving me that look, half regret, half concerned, as if she was realizing how much damage quiet complicity can do. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. December came faster than I expected. By then, the silence between my father and me had calcified into something permanent. We shared a house, but not a life. Christmas Eve was supposed to be his big moment. Every year, his family gathered, siblings, cousins, co-workers. He liked to host, play the perfect gentleman, pour the wine, give speeches about family values. That year, I planned to stay in my room. But around 7, Melissa knocked again. "Ethan," she said quietly, "could you come downstairs for a minute? I think you'll want to hear this." There was something in her tone that made me follow. The living room was crowded. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. Everyone was dressed up, and for once, the house looked alive. My father stood near the fireplace, smiling his politician smile. Then Melissa cleared her throat. "Before dinner," she said, "I'd like to share something." The room quieted. She held up a printed stack of papers, my Reddit post. My stomach dropped. She began to read. Not loud, not angry, just calm, deliberate, line by line. About a boy who lost his mother, who tried to find a home, who built something of his own, only to have it threatened by the man who was supposed to protect him. Halfway through, I noticed the color drain from my father's face. Someone whispered, "Is that about Richard?" Another cousin muttered, "God, that's awful." When she finished, the silence was absolute. My father's jaw tightened. "That's a twisted story," he said, trying to laugh. "You can't believe everything you read online." But no one laughed. Then my uncle, his older brother, spoke up. "So, 14 years ignoring your kid, and then you try to take something he worked for. Real nice, Rich." A few people nodded. Melissa didn't say another word. She just folded the paper and set it on the table. All eyes turned to me. I hadn't planned to speak, but the words came anyway, calm and clear. "You didn't lose me, Dad. You gave me away. You just didn't notice until someone else pointed it out." The room stayed silent. He opened his mouth to argue, but no sound came out. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of his silence. I owned it. After that night, everything unraveled quickly. Melissa packed her things within weeks. She moved out with the twins, leaving only a short note on the kitchen counter. Some things can't be fixed by pretending they never happened. My father tried to act unaffected. He threw himself into work, came home late, avoided me even more. But the difference was, this time, the silence wasn't mine, was his dot, and it was deafening. People say revenge feels sweet. That wasn't what this was. This was colder, cleaner. Silence had become the punishment he couldn't escape because there was no argument left to win, no son left to control. I still went to work, still taught my classes, still came home, but the house no longer felt like his kingdom. It felt like a monument to his own emptiness. Sometimes, when I walked past his study, I'd hear the faint sound of a TV he wasn't really watching. Once, I caught him staring at an empty spot on my desk where the computer used to be. He looked away quickly. That's when I realized he wasn't angry anymore. He was just haunted by the echo of what he'd lost. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to win. My silence said everything he refused to hear. And for the first time in 17 years, that silence belonged to me. After Christmas, the house no longer felt alive. The laughter that once echoed through the walls during family gatherings was gone, replaced by an emptiness that even silence couldn't fill. Melissa moved out 2 weeks later. She didn't make a scene, didn't shout or cry. She simply packed her things, loaded the twins into her car, and left a folded note on the kitchen counter. Some people build homes, others just build walls. I'm done living behind yours. When I came downstairs that morning and saw the note, I just stood there, staring at it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just felt quiet, because that's the thing about endings, they rarely come with fireworks. Most of the time they arrive like that note, short, final, and painfully calm. For a while, it was just me and my father again. Only now he didn't talk. He'd sit at the table, reading the newspaper like it could shield him from the truth. Some mornings he wouldn't even turn a page. Once I caught him looking out the window at the driveway where Melissa's car used to park. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Neither did I. The silence that used to suffocate me now belonged to him. I'd stayed long enough to finish high school and keep working at the community center. But every day, the house felt less like a home and more like a museum of mistakes, a place haunted by someone else's pride. So when Melissa's brother, David Reed, offered me a room above his garage, I didn't hesitate. He'd come by the center a few times to drop off supplies and always stayed to talk. The kind of man who listened without interrupting, who didn't look at you like you owed him something. When he heard about what happened, he said, "You don't need to keep surviving in someone else's story, kid. You get to write your own." So I moved out. David lived about 20 minutes away, in a modest two-bedroom house with a small garden and a dog named Bailey who barked at everything except me. For the first time in years, I woke up to the smell of coffee instead of tension. No one demanded to know where I was going or what I was doing. No one made me feel like a guest in my own life. I started helping David with his repair business on weekends, fixing old laptops and building refurbished computers for local schools. During the week, I kept my job at the community center, teaching kids how to code. Watching their faces light up when something finally worked, it reminded me of what I used to love about technology. It wasn't about the machines. It was about creating. Months passed. I turned 18. I saved enough to buy a cheap used car and began planning for college. Things were finally quiet, but in a different way, a better one. And then one afternoon, I saw a familiar car pull into David's driveway, my father's black sedan. For a second, I thought about pretending I wasn't home, but Bailey barked, and it was too late. Richard Miller stepped out, still in his pressed suit, still looking like a man who thought the world owed him a conversation. But this time, he looked older, smaller. He spotted me and forced a smile. "You've been busy," he said. "Nice place." I didn't invite him in, but he stepped closer anyway. "I heard you're working with David now." "That's good. I was thinking maybe we could." He hesitated. "Start over." I crossed my arms. "Start over? Yeah, I know things got out of hand, but you're still my son, Ethan. I don't want bad blood between us." He said it like the past 14 years could be erased with one apology he didn't mean. "Why now?" I asked quietly. He blinked, unprepared for the question. "Because we're family." I almost laughed. "You didn't remember that when Mom was dying. You didn't remember it when I showed up at your door with 2 suitcases, he sighed. "I made mistakes, I know, but we can fix this. I could help you out, financially. You've got your mom's inheritance coming soon, maybe we could manage it together." And there it was. The truth. Not buried, not disguised. Just sitting there, ugly and honest. He wasn't here for me. He was here for the money my mother left behind. The one thing he never earned and didn't deserve. I looked him dead in the eye. "You didn't show up when I needed a father. Don't show up now that you need my money." For once, he had no words. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just a faint exhale, like all the air had left him. We stood there, the wind rattling the trees behind him, Bailey growling softly by my side. Finally, he nodded small, defeated, and turned back toward his car. When the engine started, I felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, just an odd, light emptiness, the kind that comes when a storm finally passes and you realize you don't have to brace yourself anymore. After he left, I went back inside. David was in the kitchen, fixing a leaky faucet. He glanced up. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, and for the first time, it was true. Life since then hasn't been dramatic. It's been simple. I wake up early, walk Bailey, make coffee, go to work. I teach coding to kids who remind me of younger versions of myself, kids who think they're invisible until someone tells them they're not. Some days, I stay late just to talk with them about their projects. Watching them create something from scratch, watching them believe in what they can build, it feels like redemption. I'm not rich, I'm not famous, but I'm free, and that's worth more than anything he could ever have given me. Sometimes, people ask if I miss him. I tell them no, not out of bitterness, but because there's nothing left to miss. The man who raised me in silence taught me the value of peace, and the man who tried to take what I built taught me how to protect what truly matters. So no, I don't hate him. I don't love him either. He's just a lesson now, one I've already learned. The other day, I was reorganizing the community center's storage room when one of the kids asked, "Why do you always stay so calm when people are rude?" I smiled, because sometimes silence says everything that yelling can't. He looked confused for a moment, then nodded slowly like he understood, even if he couldn't yet explain why. As I locked up that night, I walked past the row of computers we'd built together. They weren't fancy, but they worked, and for those kids, that was enough. I thought of my father again, just for a second, and then I let the thought go. The way you let go of something heavy once you realize you never needed to carry it. He tried to take what I built, I whispered, but I built a life he'll never touch. And for the first time, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's strength. When someone tries to take what you've built, remember, ownership isn't about control. It's about respect. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories about strength, healing, and self-respect. Your support means a lot. It helps keep these stories alive.